We are going to begin this hour with one of the hardest problems in the world, and it's major news in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. For the first time yesterday, the FDA fully approved a drug that has been proven to slow the progression of symptoms for those in the early stages of the disease. 6.7 million people in the U.S., by the way, have Alzheimer's disease, and this drug, called Leqembi, is delivered with infusions every 2 weeks. In clinical trials, those infusions reduced the progression of memory loss by 27%. What does that mean? Well, experts say it could mean 6 additional months free from worsening symptoms. That would be a very big deal. We spoke with 79-year-old Susie Mitchell, who's had 4 infusions so far, and is hopeful that it is stopping further memory loss.
I watched my parents, slide down the pathway of old age, and it wasn't pretty. I don't want to be pushed aside. I want to be an active player in my life.
Didn't I say? Yeah. Our chief medical correspondent, Jon LaPook, joins us now. Jon, first approval, full approval. Yeah. Who could qualify for this? Who might benefit?
So important to emphasize, these are people with early dementia, early Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. So it's not for the people who have advanced disease.
So how do you define early?
Well, early is just, they have mild cognitive impairment. There are ways that you can test for that, but they also have to have evidence of amyloid in their brains, and either by a PET scan, which is a brain scan, or by a blood test or spinal fluid. Okay. Remember, that amyloid is that gooey substance that goes on top of the brain, and it interrupts the way that nerves can talk to each other. You need to have that for the definition diagnosis of Alzheimer's.
Yeah. But your question was, how do you...
So who can now qualify for it? That's those
early, and they have to have also. It has to be early.
And how well is a 27% reduction in memory loss? How significant is that?
Well, it translates to an 18-month trial, and in that trial, it looked like it gave you about a 5 to 6 month slowing of the denigration of your mental status, right? Mm-hmm. So it slowed the loss of cognitive function by about 6 months, 5 or 6 months. Now, that's a big deal for somebody who can have even one more day of being able to enjoy your family and not have the fog of dementia around you.
For the family to enjoy that person.
And remember, when one person has Alzheimer's, a whole bunch of people have.
It affects many people. Yeah. Honestly, it is one of my biggest fears. Every time I forget something, you go, uh-oh, is this it? Is this it?
Yeah.
I mean, and so why does this one seem to work when others have not?
Right. That is the million-dollar question. I think one thing is that it's been given these drugs that sop up amyloid too late, probably. Imagine that somebody's had 5 heart attacks, they're in heart failure, and then you say, well, let's lower your cholesterol. You have to give it early, before all the damage is done, and the changes and the damage in the brain with Alzheimer's occur maybe decades before people have symptoms. So in this case, you're starting much earlier, but there's another thing, which is, and this is very technical, I'll say it sort of very simply, the type of antibody that lecanemab is, it affects and removes plaque that's already formed, but also it prevents plaque from forming in the first
Okay, so that was my next question. When I hear about breakthroughs like this, I think like an athlete. Mm-hmm. Preventative rehab is what they would tell us so we didn't get injured. We try to protect an injury from happening. So can this prevent this from happening as you get older?
Yeah, and should we take it in our 40s? I mean, why wait?
I think that's where we're headed. So I spoke to Risa Sperling, who's a wonderful researcher up at Harvard yesterday about this. And I asked that very same question. She said, yeah, I'm doing a study right now of people with no symptoms at all, but they have evidence of amyloid on either a spinal fluid or a blood test or a brain scan or something like that, and to see if giving them lecanemab now or a medication like it might prevent Alzheimer's. So I think in the future where we're headed is a cocktail of medication. This is sort of just my sort of impression from having followed this for so long, where you have maybe different types of amyloid by different types of drugs, but also maybe a drug that affects tau, which is another abnormal protein that's inside cells, and maybe another one that decreases inflammation in the brain. So all those together and as early as possible.
Somebody told me once years ago, because, whenever you forget something like your keys, they said everybody does that, regardless of your age. What you need to worry is when you can't remember what a key is. That's when you have to pay attention. So when I hear about drugs like this, it makes me very excited, and I'm thinking, should we start taking it now? But what are the side effects? You always hear about side effects with different drugs.
Yeah, there are side effects. I mean, the biggest one
Like?
here was brain swelling and bleeding.
Well, that ain't good.
Well, but usually it was without symptoms. It's something that has to be followed very closely. There were some very serious side effects in terms of the bleeding. But again, it's going to be weighing risk and benefit. And I think these are going to be long discussions with patients. It's going to take time. The Medicare is going to cover it. It's more than $26,000 a year, but still, 20% copay plus the cost of going to the infusion centers. There may be an equity issue here.
John, is brain bleeding worth a risk?
Well, again, the people who had really serious symptoms from the bleeding, they were very, very slow. I think it was like less than 1%.
Okay.
But yes, it can be serious. It can be devastating. There were some deaths in the study that you have to think about whether you want to be on a blood thinner. This is going to be a big deal. There's going to be more to follow. I'm cautiously excited, as you can tell. But again, for people out there who have severe Alzheimer's, I don't want to give them false hope here. This is for people with early Alzheimer's. But again, very hopeful.
We can sense the enthusiasm, and hopefully this is a revolutionary drug.
Hope so.
All right, Dr. Jon LaPook, we appreciate you.